The coldest bonds are forged in winter's heart. They called him the Ice King, a ruler whose frozen gaze could shatter resolve with a single glance. I never thought I would be his, never imagined I would wear his mark, bear his name, share his bed. But fate cares little for a woman's dreams when politics demand sacrifice. My sister was supposed to be his bride, until destiny gave her a true mate. And so I became the offering instead, a southern wolf sent north to seal an alliance written in blood and duty. I told myself I would remain untouched within, that though he might claim my body, my heart would stay my own. I would be ice to match his ice, cold to match his cold. What I never expected was the fire that burned beneath his frozen exterior. What I never prepared for was the way his touch would melt the walls I'd built around my heart. They say the northern wolves guard ancient secrets in their snow-covered mountains, but the most dangerous secret of all may be what lies beneath the Alpha King's icy facade, and what happens when a reluctant bride discovers the man behind the throne. My name is Arya, and this is the story of how I was bound to the cold Alpha King against my will, and how his touch shattered my resolve. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. You look beautiful, my sister whispered, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the ceremonial crown of winter blossoms atop my head. I caught her reflection in the mirror, noted the way her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Liar, I replied, trying to inject humor into my voice, but it came out hollow. The girl staring back at me from the ornate mirror looked like a ghost, pale, drawn, with dark circles under her eyes that even the expensive makeup couldn't fully conceal. My sister Alara bit her lip. Arya, Don't, I cut her off. Please don't apologize again. It wasn't your fault. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. 3 months ago, it had been Alara who was promised to the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, a political union to end decades of territorial disputes between our packs. Then she'd met her true mate at the spring gathering, and everything had changed. A true mate bond was sacred among our kind. Not even our father, the Alpha of the Southern Crescent Pack, would force Alara to break it. And so, the burden had fallen to me. A knock at the door made us both jump. My mother entered, her face a careful mask of composure, though I could smell the anxiety rolling off her in waves. It's time, she said softly. The envoy from the north has arrived. I stood, smoothing down the elaborate white dress that felt more like a funeral shroud than a wedding gown. The material was heavy, encrusted with tiny crystals meant to represent ice, a nod to the Northern Territory's perpetual winter. How fitting that I would be adorned with symbols of cold and frost when I was being sent to a man they called the Ice King, Alpha Reese Blackthorn, the most feared shifter in the Northern Territories. Some said in all the territories. I'd never met him. I'd only heard stories. How he'd ruthlessly claimed his throne at 22 after his father's death. How he ruled with an iron fist. How his eyes were the color of a winter sky before a blizzard, and just as merciless. They said he never smiled, never showed emotion at all, and now I was to be his queen, his property. Does he know? I asked my mother, my voice barely audible. That the bride has changed? My mother exchanged a glance with Alara. Your father informed his advisors. Whether they told him, she didn't finish the sentence. Great. So I might be an unwelcome surprise. I followed my mother down the grand staircase of our pack house, Alara trailing behind us. The main hall had been transformed for the ceremony. Flowers and ribbons in the colors of both territories adorned every available surface. The effect would have been beautiful if it didn't make my stomach turn. Members of my pack lined the hall, their expressions solemn as I passed. Some reached out to squeeze my hand. Others murmured blessings. I kept my head high, my face composed. I wouldn't let them see my fear. At the front of the hall stood my father, flanked by his Beta and Gamma. Beside them were 3 men I didn't recognize, Northerners, based on their formal black attire and the silver wolf insignias on their lapels. Where is he? I whispered to my mother. Alpha Blackthorn doesn't attend the sending ceremony, she explained quietly. It's their way. You'll meet him at the receiving ceremony in the north. Of course, even for his own wedding, the Alpha King couldn't be bothered to make the journey south. Another small humiliation in what was sure to be a long line of them. My father stepped forward as we approached, his expression grave. Despite everything, I knew this was difficult for him too. He'd never intended for me to be the sacrifice. Arya, he said formally, taking my hand. You honor our pack with your duty. Words stuck in my throat. Duty, as though I had a choice. One of the northern envoys stepped forward, a tall man with sharp features and penetrating gray eyes. I am Callum, Beta to Alpha Blackthorn, he announced, his deep voice carrying throughout the hall. I come to escort the bride to the Northern Territories, where she will be joined with our Alpha in the sacred bond of mating. There was no warmth in his voice, no congratulation. This was a business transaction, nothing more. The ceremony that followed was brief and formal. My father placed my hand in Callum's, symbolically transferring my protection from one pack to another. Traditional words were spoken, blessings invoked. I moved through it all in a daze, my mind oddly detached from my body. Before I knew it, I was being led outside where 3 black SUVs waited. My small suitcase had already been loaded. I wasn't permitted to bring much. The Alpha will provide all that his mate requires, Callum had informed us stiffly, when my mother had questioned this. The reality of what was happening hit me as I stood on the steps of the only home I'd ever known. I was leaving. I might never return. Wait, I said, my voice breaking. I turned back to my family. My father stood rigid, his Alpha mask firmly in place. My mother's composure had finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. And Alara, my sister's expression was pure anguish. I hugged each of them fiercely, inhaling their familiar scents one last time. I'm so sorry, Alara whispered in my ear. I should be the one going. I pulled back, meeting her eyes. And leave Mason? No, this is how it has to be. I squeezed her hands. Be happy, Alara. That's all I ask. Callum cleared his throat impatiently behind me. I straightened my shoulders and turned away from my family, forcing myself to walk down the steps without looking back. If I looked back, I might break. The drive north was interminable, hour after hour of watching the landscape change through the tinted windows. Lush southern forests giving way to rolling hills, then the dense, snow-covered pine forests of the north. Callum sat opposite me in the spacious vehicle, but barely spoke except to offer me water, or to inform me when we'd be stopping briefly. Night had fallen by the time we reached the Northern Pack's territory. I could see lights twinkling through the trees as we wound our way up what seemed to be a mountain road. Then the forest cleared, and I gasped despite myself. The Northern Pack compound was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Where our Southern Pack house was sprawling and open, built for warmth and community, the structure before me was a fortress, a massive stone castle perched on the mountainside, with towers and battlements silhouetted against the night sky. Lights blazed from countless windows, and as we drew closer, I could see figures moving about. Welcome to Blackcrest, Callum said, speaking directly to me for the first time in hours. Home of the Northern Pack and seat of Alpha Blackthorn's power. The SUVs pulled through massive iron gates into a courtyard where dozens of people waited in formal lines. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was he among them? Would I meet my future mate now, exhausted and travel-worn? But as the vehicle stopped and the door was opened for me, I realized these were just servants and lower-ranking pack members, assembled to greet their new queen. Callum escorted me up the stone steps to where an older woman waited, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression impassive. This is Helena, the pack's head housekeeper, Callum introduced. She will show you to your chambers and explain the proceedings for tomorrow's ceremony. With that, he gave a curt nod and left me standing there, feeling abandoned all over again. Helena didn't smile as she curtsied. Follow me, miss. The hour is late, and you'll need rest before tomorrow. I followed her through massive doors into an entrance hall that could have swallowed my entire pack house. Everything was stone and dark wood, with tapestries depicting hunting scenes and ancient battles. The air was surprisingly warm despite the cavernous space, and I detected the faint scent of pine and wood smoke. We climbed a grand staircase and navigated a maze of corridors until Helena stopped before an ornately carved door. She pushed it open to reveal a suite of rooms more luxurious than anything I'd ever seen. A sitting area with plush furniture, a bedroom visible through another doorway, and what appeared to be a private bathroom. These will be your quarters until the mating ceremony, Helena explained. Afterward, you'll move to the Alpha's wing. I swallowed hard. And where is the Alpha now? Helena's expression remained neutral. Alpha Blackthorn is attending to important pack business. He will meet you at the ceremony tomorrow. Of course he would. Why bother meeting his bride before he claimed her in front of his entire pack? Your belongings have been unpacked. Helena continued. There's food if you're hungry, and the bathroom has been prepared if you wish to bathe. A handmaiden will arrive at dawn to help you prepare. With that, she curtsied again and left, closing the door behind her. Alone at last, I sank onto a nearby chair, finally allowing the tears I'd been holding back all day to fall. I buried my face in my hands and wept. For my home, for my family, for the life I'd never get to live. When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollow, emptied out. I forced myself to stand and explore my new prison. The rooms were undeniably beautiful, with finely crafted furniture and expensive fabrics in shades of blue and silver. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In the bedroom, I found my few belongings neatly arranged, looking pitiful and out of place amidst the opulence. On the massive four-poster bed lay a nightgown of sheer white silk. I turned away, my stomach churning. Tomorrow night, after the ceremony, the alpha would expect to claim his mate. The thought made me shudder. The bathroom offered temporary escape. I filled the deep porcelain tub with steaming water and fragrant oils, then sank into it, willing the heat to melt away my tension. I'd never been one for self-pity, but if ever there was a time for it, surely this was it. I must have dozed off in the bath, for I was startled awake by a noise in the outer chamber. Panic seized me as I realized someone had entered my rooms. I rose quickly, wrapping a thick towel around myself. "Hello?" I called, my voice unsteady. "Helena?" No answer came. Cautiously, I opened the bathroom door and peered into the bedroom. It appeared empty, but something was different. On the bed, where the nightgown had been, now lay a small wooden box. Heart pounding, I approached it. The box was beautifully carved with the image of a wolf running through a forest. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a pendant, a teardrop-shaped crystal that seemed to contain a swirling mist within its depths. It hung from a delicate silver chain. Beneath it was a folded note, written in a strong, angular hand. "For my bride. Wear it tomorrow if you wish." No signature, no warm words of welcome, just a command thinly disguised as a choice. I lifted the pendant, surprised by its weight. As it caught the firelight, the mist inside seemed to shift and change, revealing flecks of blue and silver. Despite myself, I was entranced by its beauty. Who had delivered it? Had it been the Alpha himself? Had he stood in this very room while I bathed, just feet away? The thought sent another shiver through me, though I couldn't say whether from fear or something else. I placed the pendant back in its box and closed the lid firmly. If Alpha Blackthorn thought to win me over with pretty trinkets, he was sorely mistaken. I was here because I had to be, not because I wanted to be. No gift would change that. Outside the windows, snow had begun to fall, tiny flakes swirling in the night wind. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, watching my breath fog the pain. Tomorrow I would meet the Ice King. Tomorrow I would become his queen. And somehow, I would survive. The dawn broke with harsh clarity, sunlight reflecting blindingly off the snow-covered landscape outside my window. I'd barely slept, plagued by strange dreams of running through endless forests, pursued by a shadow I couldn't see, but could feel breathing down my neck. A sharp knock at the door announced the arrival of my handmaiden, a young woman perhaps a few years younger than my 22 years, with auburn hair and a dusting of freckles across her nose. "Good morning, miss," she said, curtsying deeply. "I'm Lydia. I'm here to help you prepare." Her friendly smile was the first I'd seen since arriving, and I found myself returning it automatically. "Please, call me Arya." She looked startled. "Oh, I couldn't, miss. Not with you being the Alpha's mate and all." "I'm not his mate yet," I pointed out. Lydia busied herself laying out various bottles and brushes on the dressing table. "Well, no, but it's as good as done, isn't it? The whole pack's been talking about nothing else for weeks." "Weeks?" I echoed, sinking onto the stool before the mirror. "But the arrangement was only finalized 3 days ago." Lydia's hands stilled momentarily. 3 days? But the Alpha announced your arrival over a month ago. That didn't make sense. A month ago, Alara had still been the intended bride. Had there been some miscommunication? Or had Alpha Blackthorn somehow known about the switch before it happened? Before I could question Lydia further, the door opened again, and Helena entered, followed by 2 more women carrying a large garment bag. "I see you're awake," Helena said briskly. Good. We have much to do. What followed was hours of primping and polishing. I was bathed again, my skin scrubbed until it glowed pink. My hair was washed and styled, arranged in an elaborate updo with small crystal pins that matched the snow falling outside. Makeup was applied with expert precision, emphasizing my eyes and giving my lips a soft, rosy hue. Throughout it all, Helena directed the proceedings with military efficiency, barely speaking to me directly. Lydia, however, kept up a steady stream of chatter, providing a welcome distraction. "You'll love it here once you get used to it," she assured me, as she applied scented oil to my skin. "Winters are harsh, but the pack takes care of its own, and the summer festivals are wonderful. Oh, the Alpha's birthday celebration is just a month away. You'll be planning that, of course. The previous Alpha's mate always—" "Lydia," Helena cut in sharply. "That's enough talk." The girl ducked her head, chastened. "Sorry, ma'am." I filed away this small interaction. It seemed discussion of the previous Alpha, Reese Blackthorn's father, was discouraged. Interesting. Finally, it was time for the dress. The women carefully removed it from the garment bag, and despite my resolve to remain unmoved, I couldn't help but gasp. It was exquisite, a creation of pale blue silk that shimmered like ice in sunlight, with an overlay of delicate silver lace. The bodice was fitted, with a sweetheart neckline and long, close-fitting sleeves. The skirt flowed out in gentle waves that would trail behind me as I walked. "It's beautiful," I admitted, as they helped me into it. "The Alpha commissioned it specially," Helena said, her voice thawing slightly. "He was most particular about the design." Another surprise. I'd assumed the dress would be a northern tradition, not something created specifically for me. As the women secured the tiny buttons running down the back, I caught sight of the wooden box still sitting on my bedside table. "The pendant," I said. "Should I?" Helena followed my gaze. "That is for you to decide. It is a gift, not a requirement." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to leave it behind as a small act of defiance, but another part, a part I was reluctant to acknowledge, was curious. The pendant had been the only personal touch in this entire arranged union, and it was undeniably beautiful. "I'll wear it," I decided. Lydia fetched the box, opening it reverently. "Oh, miss," she breathed. "It's a winter heart stone. I've never seen one so large." "A what?" "A winter heart," she repeated, lifting the pendant from its velvet bed. "They're very rare, found only in the deepest caves of the northern mountains. Legend says they contain the essence of the first winter, captured by the moon goddess herself." She fastened the chain around my neck, her fingers gentle. "They're said to reveal the true nature of the one who wears them." I touched the crystal, cool against my skin. The mist inside seemed to move with my touch, swirling like a miniature storm. "What do you mean, reveal the true nature?" Lydia shrugged. "Just an old tale, but they're considered extremely valuable. For the Alpha to give you one." She trailed off, glancing at Helena. "It is a great honor," Helena finished firmly. "Now we must proceed. It's nearly time." A knock at the door heralded Callum's arrival. The beta's eyes widened briefly when he saw me, though his expression quickly returned to its usual impassivity. "You look suitable," he said, which I gathered was high praise from him. "Are you ready?" No, I would never be ready, but I nodded anyway. Callum offered his arm, which I took with all the dignity I could muster. As we left my chambers, I noticed the corridor was lined with pack members, all dressed in formal attire. They bowed as we passed, their eyes curious. We descended the grand staircase and proceeded through a different wing of the castle than I'd seen the previous night. Finally, we reached a set of massive double doors, carved with the images of two wolves standing sentinel. "The Great Hall," Callum explained. "The entire pack is assembled inside." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "The Alpha can be intense. Do not show fear." With that less than reassuring advice, he nodded to the guards, who pulled open the doors. The sound hit me first. Hundreds of voices suddenly hushed, leaving a silence so complete it seemed to have weight. Then came the sense, a multitude of unfamiliar wolves, their collective presence almost overwhelming to my senses. The great hall was cavernous, with high vaulted ceilings supported by stone columns. Massive chandeliers hung from iron chains, casting warm light over the assembled crowd. At the far end, upon a raised dais, stood a throne-like chair carved from a single piece of dark wood. and upon that throne sat the man who was to be my mate. Even from a distance, Alpha Reese Blackthorn commanded attention. He was tall, taller than any man in the room, with broad shoulders and a powerful build, evident even beneath his formal black attire. His hair was as dark as a raven's wing, swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble by a sculptor with little interest in softness. As Callum led me down the central aisle, the pack members on either side bowed their heads respectfully. I kept my gaze fixed ahead, on the man I was approaching with each step. When we reached the foot of the dais, Callum released my arm and stepped aside. For the first time, I looked directly into the face of Alpha Reese Blackthorn. His eyes were indeed the color of a winter sky before a blizzard, a pale, icy blue that seemed to cut right through me. His features were sharp and aristocratic. High cheekbones, a straight nose, a jaw that could have been chiseled from stone. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 28 or 30, but there was nothing youthful about his expression. His mouth was set in a firm line, neither frowning nor smiling. He was, without question, the most intimidating man I'd ever seen, and also, infuriatingly, the most handsome. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, his gaze traveling from my face down the length of my body and back up again, assessing. I fought the urge to fidget under his scrutiny, keeping my spine straight and my chin lifted. Finally, he rose from his throne in one fluid motion and descended the 3 steps to stand before me. He was even taller up close, forcing me to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "Arya of the Southern Crescent," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Welcome to Blackcrest." It wasn't the traditional greeting for a mating ceremony, which should have begun with an acknowledgement of our future bond. This small deviation didn't escape me, nor, based on the subtle murmurs, the assembled pack. "Alpha Blackthorn," I replied, offering the formal curtsy I'd been taught. "I am honored by your welcome." His eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps detecting the hint of insincerity in my tone. Without warning, he reached out and touched the pendant at my throat, his fingers brushing my skin. A jolt of something, not quite pain, but intense sensation, shot through me at the contact. The mist within the crystal swirled violently. "You wore it," he observed. "You asked me to," I countered. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but a break in his impassive mask. Asked, not commanded. "Is there a difference in the north?" A ripple of shocked whispers swept through the hall. Apparently, no one spoke to the Alpha this way. Callum, standing nearby, looked as though he might faint. But Reese Blackthorn didn't appear angry. If anything, that almost smile became more pronounced. "Perhaps you will teach us the difference," he said, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. Then, louder, he addressed the assembly. "Today marks a new chapter for the Northern Pack. With this union, we forge an alliance with the South that will strengthen both our territories." He turned to face me fully, taking my hands in his. His touch was surprisingly warm for a man they called the Ice King. "Arya of the Southern Crescent," he said formally. "I, Reese Blackthorn, Alpha of the Northern Pack, take you as my mate, to stand at my side, to share in my strength, to bear my mark in my young. Do you accept?" The traditional words, spoken in that commanding voice, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. This was it, the moment I surrendered my freedom, my future, my body to this stranger, for my pack, for my family, for peace. "I, Arya of the Southern Crescent, accept you, Reese Blackthorn, as my mate," I recited, my voice steadier than I felt. "I will stand at your side, share in your strength, bear your mark and your young." A collective sigh swept through the hall, as though the entire pack had been holding its breath. Reese released one of my hands and signaled to a small elderly man who approached carrying a velvet cushion. Upon it rested 2 rings, one large and one small, both fashioned from a silvery metal I didn't recognize, set with stones that matched my pendant. The Alpha took the smaller ring and slid it onto my finger. I did the same with his, surprised by the warmth of his skin against mine. "With these rings we are promised," Reese announced. "The mating will be completed at moonrise," another deviation from tradition. Normally, the mating bite would be exchanged immediately after the rings, cementing the bond. By delaying it until moonrise, Reese was making a statement, though I wasn't entirely sure what that statement was. Before I could ponder this further, he surprised me again by leaning down and pressing his lips to mine in a brief, firm kiss. It wasn't part of the ceremony at all, and I heard several gasps from the crowd. His lips were warm, and despite the brevity of the contact, I felt that same jolt I'd experienced when he touched the pendant. When he pulled back, his eyes seemed a shade darker, and there was a slight furrow between his brows, as though he too had felt something unexpected. "Now," he said, turning to address the assembly once more, "we feast." The formality of the ceremony gave way to celebration, as servants appeared with trays of food and drink. Tables that had been set against the walls were brought forward and arranged throughout the hall. Musicians began to play, the lively northern melodies unlike the softer southern tunes I was accustomed to. Through it all, Reese kept me at his side, his hand at the small of my back, guiding me to a table on the dais where we were to be seated. As we walked, pack members approached to offer their congratulations and to be introduced to their new Luna. I smiled and nodded, trying to remember names and faces, but my mind was whirling. Nothing was proceeding as I'd expected. The Alpha wasn't the cruel tyrant I'd been led to believe. Intimidating, yes. Powerful, certainly. But there was an unexpected intelligence in his eyes, a thoughtfulness in his interactions that didn't align with the stories I'd heard. As we took our seats, servants hurried to fill our goblets with wine and to place platters of food before us. The fare was rich and hearty, roasted meats, root vegetables glazed with honey, dark bread still warm from the oven. "You should eat," Reese said, noticing my hesitation. "The ceremony of completing the bond requires strength." I took a small bite of bread, finding it difficult to swallow past the knot of anxiety in my throat. The ceremony of completing the bond was a delicate way of referring to what would happen in his bedchamber at moonrise. "You're afraid," he observed, his voice neutral. I lifted my chin. "I'm cautious. I know nothing about you except rumors. And what rumors have you heard, I wonder? That you're cruel, merciless, that they call you the Ice King because your heart is frozen." To my surprise, he chuckled, a low, rich sound that seemed to vibrate through me. "And do you believe these rumors?" I studied him, taking in the sharp angles of his face, the intensity of his gaze. "I believe there's a reason for them," I said carefully. Whether that reason is truth or misunderstanding, I cannot yet say. He regarded me with new interest, as though I'd presented him with an unexpected puzzle. "You're not what I anticipated. Nor you," I admitted. "I expected someone older." "Disappointed?" "Confused," I corrected. "Why would an alpha as young and powerful as yourself need an arranged mating? Surely you could have your pick of willing females." His expression closed off, the brief glimpse of warmth vanishing like sun behind clouds. "Arranged matings have advantages. Politics, alliances, bloodlines. These matter more than temporary desire. Is that all I am to you? A political advantage? What else would you be?" he countered. But there was something in his tone that suggested the question wasn't entirely rhetorical. Before I could respond, a commotion broke out near the entrance to the hall. A guard hurried to Reese's side, bending to whisper in his ear. The Alpha's expression hardened instantly, his entire body tensing like a predator preparing to strike. "Stay here," he commanded, rising from his seat. "What's happening?" I asked, alarmed by the sudden change in atmosphere. Reese's eyes, when they met mine, had shifted from icy blue to a glowing electric blue, his wolf rising close to the surface. "Trouble," he said simply, then strode away, Callum and several other high-ranking pack members falling in behind him. Left alone on the dais, I watched as whispers spread through the crowd like ripples on a pond. The music had stopped, and the festive mood evaporated, replaced by nervous tension. Lydia appeared at my side, her face pale. Luna, perhaps you should return to your chambers." "What's going on, Lydia?" I demanded. "Tell me." She glanced nervously toward the entrance where Reese had disappeared. "Rogues," she whispered. "A band of them, at the northern border. They've attacked one of our outposts." "Rogues?" I repeated, confused. "This far north, in winter?" Rogues were wolf shifters who had either left or been expelled from their packs. They typically lived solitary lives or in small, unstructured groups. They rarely ventured into pack territories, especially not those of powerful alphas like Reese Blackthorn. "It's been happening more frequently," Lydia admitted, wringing her hands. "They're organized somehow, more dangerous. The alpha's been—" She stopped abruptly, shooting another nervous glance toward the entrance. "The alpha's been what?" I pressed. Lydia bit her lip. "Please, Luna." I shouldn't say more, but you really should return to your chambers. It's safer. I was about to argue when Helena appeared, her expression grave. Luna Aria, the Alpha has requested you be escorted to your chambers until the situation is assessed. I wanted to protest being dismissed like a child, but I recognized that this was neither the time nor the place to assert myself. I was in a strange territory, surrounded by wolves I didn't know, in the midst of what appeared to be a security threat. Very well, I agreed, rising from my seat. Helena and Lydia flanked me as we left the great hall, the whispers of the pack following us out. Instead of returning to the chambers I'd occupied the previous night, they led me to a different wing of the castle, up a spiraling staircase to a corridor guarded by 2 imposing wolves in military attire. The Alpha's wing, Helena explained, as the guards bowed and stepped aside. These will be your permanent quarters now. The suite they led me to was even more luxurious than my previous accommodation. The sitting room was twice as large, with a massive stone fireplace and comfortable furniture upholstered in rich fabrics. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the snow-covered mountains. The bedroom beyond was dominated by an enormous bed with intricately carved posts and a canopy of midnight blue velvet. The linens were crisp white, turned down invitingly. A door off to one side led to a bathroom that contained not only a deep copper tub, but also a modern shower with multiple jets. The Alpha's chambers are through that door, Helena said, indicating a connecting door I hadn't noticed. He will join you at moonrise. With that, she and Lydia departed, leaving me alone in my gilded cage. I moved to the windows, gazing out at the vast wilderness beyond. Somewhere out there, Rhys was confronting rogues who had dared to challenge his territory. I wondered what kind of Alpha he was in battle. Was he as controlled and calculating as he appeared, or did he unleash the beast that lurked behind those icy eyes? The pendant at my throat seemed to grow heavier, warmer. I looked down and gasped. The mist inside was no longer silver but had turned a deep, pulsing blue. As I watched, it shifted again, swirling with flecks of gold. Lydia's words came back to me. They're said to reveal the true nature of the one who wears them. What was it revealing about me? Or was it somehow connected to Rhys, reflecting his emotions or state of being? Outside, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon. In a few hours it would be moonrise. In a few hours, I would complete the mating bond with a man I barely knew, a man who was, at this very moment, possibly fighting for his territory. I turned away from the window and began to pace, my mind racing with questions. Who were these rogues? Why were they attacking the Northern Territory? And what did it mean for my future here? As the daylight faded and shadows lengthened across the room, I found myself drawn to the connecting door that led to Rhys's chambers. Would it be locked? Would he be angry if I looked inside? Curiosity won out. I approached the door and tentatively turned the handle. To my surprise, it opened easily. Rhys's bedroom was larger than mine, but far less ornate. The furnishings were simple but of obvious quality. A massive bed with plain dark linens, a heavy wooden desk covered in papers, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. The only decorative element was a large painting above the fireplace depicting a lone wolf standing on a cliff, silhouetted against a full moon. The room smelled of him, pine, wood smoke, and something uniquely male that made my wolf stir with interest. I pushed that reaction aside, focusing instead on the papers scattered across his desk. Maps, I realized, moving closer. Maps of the territories, with markers indicating what appeared to be attack sites. There were dozens of them, spanning months, all along the northern border. This wasn't a sudden incursion. The northern pack had been under siege for some time. A journal lay open beside the maps, filled with neat, angular handwriting, the same hand that had written the note accompanying my pendant. I hesitated, knowing I was intruding, but my concern outweighed my manners. The entry was dated 3 days ago. Another attack repelled, but at cost. 3 warriors wounded, 1 critically. The rogues are becoming bolder, their tactics more coordinated. This is not random aggression. Someone is directing them, someone with knowledge of our patrol patterns and defenses. The Southern Alliance becomes more crucial with each passing day. If we cannot stem these incursions soon, we risk exposure to the humans or worse. I must complete the mating bond quickly, secure the Southern forces promised in the treaty. The girl is not what I expected, but it changes nothing. The pack must come first. I stepped back from the desk, my heart pounding. So that was why Rhys had been so insistent on the alliance, why he'd announced my arrival before it was even confirmed. The Northern Pack was in danger, more serious danger than anyone in the South had realized, and I was nothing more than a means to an end, a way to secure Southern warriors to bolster his defenses. I returned to my chambers, closing the connecting door quietly behind me. Night had fallen completely now, and moonrise couldn't be far off. Would Rhys even return, given the crisis at the border? Or would the completion of our bond be postponed? Part of me hoped for the latter, though I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Sooner or later, the Ice King would claim his bride, and when he did, I would be bound to him forever, not as a partner, not as a mate in the true sense, but as a political asset. The thought should have angered me, or at least disappointed me. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow ache in my chest. I touched the pendant again, noticing that the swirling mist had calmed, returning to its original silver color. Whatever my fate, I would face it with dignity. I was Arya of the Southern Crescent. I might be a pawn in this game of territorial politics, but I would not be a passive one. Outside, the moon began to rise. Moonlight streamed through the windows, painting silver paths across the floor. I sat in a chair by the fire, still wearing my ceremonial dress, waiting. The castle had grown quiet. The celebrations below ended abruptly by the news of the attack. Occasionally, I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, guards patrolling, perhaps, or servants going about their duties. But no Alpha. I must have dozed off, for I startled awake at the sound of the main door opening. Rhys stood in the doorway, his powerful frame silhouetted against the dimly lit corridor. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, then stood there, watching me. I rose to my feet, suddenly very aware of my rumpled appearance. "Is everything all right?" "The rogues. Dealt with," he said curtly. As he stepped into the firelight, I could see that he'd changed from his formal attire into simpler clothes, a black shirt and trousers, that nonetheless looked expensive. His hair was damp, as if he'd recently bathed, but it was his face that captured my attention. A fresh cut ran along his jaw, already healing but still visible, and his eyes, no longer icy but burning with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You were hurt," I said, moving toward him without thinking. He stiffened as I approached. "It's nothing." I stopped, feeling foolish. Of course he wouldn't want my concern. To him, I was just a treaty obligation, a means to Southern reinforcements. "I apologize for the delay," he said formally. "The situation required my immediate attention." "I understand." His gaze traveled over me, lingering on the pendant at my throat. "You're still wearing the dress." I wasn't sure if... I trailed off, uncertain how to finish that sentence without sounding either presumptuous or reluctant. A muscle in his jaw ticked. If I would return to complete the mating. Yes. He moved further into the room, his movements those of a predator, controlled, powerful, aware of every space around him. "I considered postponing," he admitted, "but circumstances make that inadvisable. The treaty, the Southern warriors he needed." I fought to keep my expression neutral, though something in his gaze suggested he sensed my thoughts anyway. "You saw my chambers," he said. Not a question, but a statement. I lifted my chin. The door wasn't locked. No, it wasn't. He moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. "What did you learn, I wonder?" "That the Northern Pack faces a threat more serious than the South has been led to believe," I replied honestly. "That these rogue attacks have been ongoing for months. And that this mating, this alliance, is more about military necessity than diplomatic relations." He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Does that disappoint you? Would you prefer pretty lies about destiny and desire?" "I would prefer the truth," I said simply. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging approval. "The truth, then." "Yes, the Northern Pack needs the warriors promised in the treaty. Yes, I agreed to this mating primarily for the sake of my territory and my people." He took a step closer. "But that doesn't mean I find the arrangement displeasing." The way he said it, with that deep voice and those intense eyes, sent a shiver down my spine that wasn't entirely fear. "The moon is high," he continued, glancing toward the windows. It's time to complete the bond. My heart began to race. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading since leaving my home. Once the mating bite was exchanged, there would be no going back. I would belong to this man, to this pack, forever. Unless, Reese said, his voice oddly gentle, you wish to refuse. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? The mating bite must be freely given to form a true bond, he explained, watching me carefully. If you refuse, we can maintain the appearance of a mating for political purposes, but the bond itself would not form. I stared at him, stunned. You would allow that? I would not force a mating on an unwilling female, he said, something like offense flickering across his features, regardless of political expediency. It was a way out, or at least a partial one. I could avoid the intimate connection of a true mating bond while still fulfilling my duty to my pack. I could maintain some small piece of myself, keep my mind and emotions my own. But as I looked at Reese, standing there with firelight playing across his features, I felt a strange reluctance. Despite his cold exterior, despite the political nature of our union, there was something about him that called to my wolf, a strength, a solidity, a sense that beneath that icy control burned something fierce and passionate, and I was curious. Goddess help me. What would happen? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. If we don't complete the bond? Reese's expression remained neutral, but I sensed a tension in him. We would live as mates in name only, share these quarters, appear together publicly, but maintain separate lives privately. And if we do complete it, his eyes darkened slightly, we would be true mates, connected in mind and spirit as well as in name. We would sense each other's emotions, sometimes even thoughts. In times of danger, we would be able to locate each other through the bond. He paused. The connection would be intimate. The way he said intimate made heat bloom in my core. Would you be able to control me through it? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Command me as your alpha? No, he said firmly. The mating bond doesn't work that way. It connects, it doesn't subjugate. I nodded, considering. A true mating would mean truly belonging to this pack, to this man. It would mean opening myself to someone who saw me primarily as a political asset. But it would also mean having a real place here, a real role. And perhaps over time it could become something more. I consent, I said finally. I will complete the bond. Something flashed in Reese's eyes. Relief? Satisfaction? Or something deeper? Very well, he said, his voice lower than before. The traditional method is... I know how it's done, I interrupted, heat rising to my cheeks. The corner of his mouth twitched. Of course. He gestured toward the bedroom. Shall we? I nodded, not trusting my voice, and moved toward the bedroom on legs that felt suddenly unsteady. The massive bed looked both inviting and intimidating in the moonlight streaming through the windows. Reese followed, his presence a tangible force behind me. When I reached the edge of the bed, I turned to face him, gathering my courage. The dress, I said. I'll need help with the buttons. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Turn around. I did as he asked, presenting my back to him. His fingers brushed my skin as he began to unfasten the tiny buttons running down my spine. Each touch sent tiny shocks through me, making my breath come quicker. You're trembling, he observed, his voice a low rumble near my ear. I'm nervous, I admitted. Don't be. His hands paused, resting lightly on my shoulders. I won't hurt you, Arya. It was the first time he'd said my name like that. Softly, intimately. It did strange things to my insides. He resumed unfastening the buttons, working his way down to the small of my back. When he finished, he stepped away, giving me space. I'll wait for you in bed, he said, then moved to the other side of the room, turning his back to offer me privacy. I slipped out of the dress, letting it pool at my feet. Beneath it, I wore only thin undergarments, a lacy bra and matching panties that had been provided with the dress. I hesitated, then removed those as well, acutely aware of my nakedness in this strange room, with this strange man. The bed linens were cool against my skin as I slid between them, pulling the covers up to my chin. I'm ready, I called softly. What followed was both gentle and fierce, a discovery of bodies and pleasures I'd never imagined. Reese was attentive, patient yet passionate, guiding me to heights I'd never known existed. When we both lay breathless, bodies entwined. He looked into my eyes and said, "Are you certain?" I nodded, beyond words. He lowered his head to my neck, his breath hot against my skin. "This will hurt, but only for a moment." His teeth broke my skin, the pain sharp, but brief, quickly replaced by a rush of sensation so intense it bordered on ecstasy. I felt something, an energy, a presence, flow from him into me, filling spaces I hadn't known were empty. When he raised his head, his eyes glowed fiercely. He tilted his head, exposing his own neck. "Now you," he urged. I leaned forward and bit into the strong column of his throat. His blood was hot on my tongue, carrying the essence of him. Strength, power, but also a deep, unexpected loneliness that made my heart ache. As my teeth broke his skin, I felt the bond snap into place, a shimmering connection between us. Suddenly, I could sense him in a way that went beyond the physical. I could feel his pleasure, his satisfaction, and underneath it all, a profound sense of relief. "It's done," he murmured. "We are mated." The bond between us pulsed, new and raw and powerful. I could feel his heartbeat as clearly as my own, sense the swirl of his emotions. "I can feel you," I whispered, awed despite myself. "In my mind, in my heart. And you." His fingers traced the bite mark on my neck. "It's stronger than I expected. Is that unusual?" He nodded slowly. The strength of a mating bond typically reflects the compatibility of the wolves involved. The stronger the bond, the more compatible the mates. I absorbed this information, unsure how to feel about it. We were compatible, it seemed, on some fundamental level. My wolf and his, my spirit and his. Yet our union had been arranged, political, not a choice made from love or even attraction. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly feeling vulnerable. Reese's expression softened slightly. "Now you are Luna of the Northern Pack in truth as well as name. My mate, my equal in the eyes of our people." "Your equal?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. I thought Northern Alphas ruled absolutely. "Northern Alphas lead," he corrected. "But a wise Alpha values the counsel of his Luna." His hand cupped my cheek. "Especially one with your strength and insight." I wasn't sure if he was flattering me, or if he truly saw value in me beyond the alliance I represented. The bond between us hummed with sincerity, but it was too new, too untested for me to fully trust it. "Rest now," he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges." He made to move away, but I caught his arm. "Stay," I said, surprising myself again. "Please." Something flickered in his eyes. Warmth, perhaps, or gratitude. He settled back beside me, drawing me against his chest. Despite everything, the arranged mating, the political motivations, the uncertainty of my new role, I felt safe, protected, and as sleep claimed me, I wondered if perhaps this cold alpha wasn't quite as frozen as his reputation suggested. I woke to an empty bed, and sunlight streaming through the windows. The events of the night before rushed back, bringing warmth to my cheeks, and an awareness of pleasant soreness in my body. My hand went to my neck, feeling the slightly raised skin where Reese's bite had marked me. The bond between us thrummed quietly, letting me sense that he was alive and well, but distant, somewhere else in the castle. I noticed a tray on the bedside table with a folded note in Reese's handwriting. "Matters requiring my attention. Helena will attend you this morning. Join me for lunch in my study at noon." Our brief and to the point. I tried not to feel disappointed as I ate the breakfast he'd left for me. What had I expected? Flowery declarations of newfound affection? After bathing, I dressed in a simple gown of deep blue wool that Helena had brought, along with several other outfits apparently commissioned by Reese before my arrival. The pendant he'd given me glinted at my throat, the mist inside now a calm, clear silver. "The winter heart becomes you," Helena observed as she helped arrange my hair. "You can wear them so well." "What do you mean?" "Winter heart stones respond to the wearer's essence, their true self. Some turn cloudy or dull when worn. Others, like yours, remain clear and vibrant." "And what does that mean?" I pressed. "It means you have strength," she said simply, "and clarity of purpose." Helena showed me around the castle, introducing me to key staff members. The fortress was even larger than I'd initially thought, with multiple levels, hidden courtyards, and passages that wound through the mountainside itself. As we passed through a long gallery lined with portraits of previous alphas, I noticed a handsome man in his 40s, with Reese's face but softer, less severe. The previous Alpha, Helena explained. Orion Blackthorn, the Alpha's father. What happened to him? I asked, recalling how Lydia had been silenced when mentioning him. Helena's expression closed off slightly. He died 5 years ago, during a hunting expedition. The Alpha doesn't speak of it. I sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, I asked about another portrait. A beautiful woman with golden hair and kind eyes, so different from the stern blackthorns around her. That was Luna Vivian, the Alpha's mother, Helena said, her voice softening. She died when he was 14, a rare illness that even our healers couldn't cure. I studied the portrait, noting the warmth in the woman's smile, so at odds with her son's cold demeanor. They look nothing alike. The Alpha takes after his father in appearance, Helena agreed. But those who knew Luna Vivian say he has her heart beneath it all. As we continued our tour, I became aware of the stares and whispers that followed us. Pack members bowed or curtsied as I passed, but their eyes followed me with curiosity and, in some cases, wariness. We rounded a corner and nearly collided with a tall, elegant woman with flame-red hair and sharp green eyes, dressed in fighting leathers with a knife strapped to her thigh. Helena, the woman acknowledged, then turned her assessing gaze on me. So this is the Southern Bride. Luna Aria, Helena corrected stiffly. This is Commander Isolde, leader of the Alpha's elite guard. Isolde did not curtsy, merely inclined her head slightly. Luna, she said, the title sounding almost like a challenge on her lips. Commander, I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I've heard northern female warriors are among the fiercest in all the territories. Something like surprise flickered in her eyes, followed by grudging respect. We are, she confirmed, though I understood southern females preferred gentler pursuits. Some do, I acknowledged. Others find strength takes many forms. Isolde studied me a moment longer, then smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Indeed, perhaps you'll join our training sessions sometime. See if southern wolves can keep pace with northern ones. I look forward to it, I said, though the prospect was mildly terrifying. As we approached Reese's study, I felt the bond between us strengthen, indicating he was nearby. A strange flutter of anticipation rose in my stomach, which I quickly suppressed. This was not a love match, I reminded myself. Our connection was political, practical, yet my body remembered his touch. My wolf recognized his strength, and the bond between us pulsed with an awareness that went beyond rational thought. I knocked and entered to find a spacious room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk covered in papers. Maps hung on the walls, marked with the same notations I'd seen in his bedroom. Reese stood by the window, his back to me, his posture tense. Through the bond, I could sense his agitation, though his voice when he spoke was controlled. You've seen the castle, he asked without turning. Most of it, I replied. It's impressive. It's defensible, he corrected, finally facing me. Which is what matters. His eyes were shadowed, as if he hadn't slept, and the fresh cut along his jaw from the night before had already healed to a faint pink line. Despite his obvious fatigue, he was still devastatingly handsome in the daylight, all sharp angles and controlled power. Helena tells me you wish to attend council meetings, he said, gesturing for me to take a seat at a small table where lunch had been laid out. I sat, surprised that Helena had already relayed my request. Yes, if I'm to be Luna of this pack, I want to understand all aspects of its governance. Reese took the seat opposite me, his expression unreadable. Most Lunas concern themselves primarily with domestic matters. I'm not most Lunas. A flash of something, amusement, respect, crossed his features. No, you're not, he agreed. Very well. The council meets this afternoon. You may attend. I hadn't expected him to agree so easily. Thank you. We ate in silence for a few moments, the bond between us humming with unspoken thoughts and emotions. I could sense his exhaustion, his concern, and beneath it all, a deep, abiding sense of responsibility that seemed to weigh on him like a physical burden. The rogues, I said finally. They're more than just random attacks, aren't they? Reese's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and assessing. What makes you say that? Your maps, I replied, nodding toward his desk. The attack patterns are too coordinated, too strategic. He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Yes, he said finally. We believe someone is directing them. Someone with knowledge of our patrol patterns and defenses. A traitor within the pack? Possibly. His jaw tightened. Or someone who once had access to such information. I thought about this. The implications troubling. What do they want? Territory? Power? Both, perhaps. Reese set down his fork, his appetite apparently gone. Or something more specific. There have been incursions near the sacred caves. The caves where Winterheart stones are found? He nodded, looking impressed that I knew this. The caves hold other secrets as well. Ancient knowledge, powerful artifacts. My ancestors protected them for generations. And now that duty falls to you, I said softly, understanding a little more about the weight he carried. Yes, his gaze was distant, focused on something beyond the room. And I will not fail in it. The fierce determination in his voice sent a shiver through me. Whatever else Reese Blackthorn might be, he was utterly committed to his pack and his duty. What can I do to help? I asked. His eyes returned to me, surprise evident in them. You want to help? I'm your mate, I said simply. Your pack is my pack now. Your burdens, my burdens. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his rigid posture. Most southern wolves would be planning their escape by now, he observed, not offering to shoulder northern problems. I'm not most southern wolves, I reminded him. No, he agreed, a hint of warmth in his voice. You're not. The moment stretched between us, the bond pulsing with new awareness. Then Reese cleared his throat and rose from his seat. The council will be assembling soon, he said, his voice once again the cool, controlled tone of the alpha. There's something I need to show you first. Curious, I followed him through a door at the back of his study that led to a narrow staircase winding upward. We climbed in silence until we emerged onto a small, sheltered balcony high on the castle's northern wall. The view took my breath away. Before us stretched the vast northern territory, endless forests of pine and fir, snow-covered mountains rising in the distance, and winding through it all, a frozen river that glittered like a ribbon of diamonds in the winter sun. It's beautiful, I whispered. It's home, Reese said simply, coming to stand beside me. This is what I protect. What my father protected before me, and his father before him. I understood then why he had brought me here, to show me not just the land, but the legacy he carried, the responsibility that drove him. The northern wolves have always been the guardians, he continued, his voice low and intense. Not just of our territory, but of the ancient powers that sleep within it. The humans don't know. They think these are just mountains and forests. But there are things here older than shifters, older than humans. Things that must stay hidden. The sacred caves, I murmured. He nodded. And other places. When the rogues attack our borders, they're not just testing our defenses. They're searching for weaknesses, paths to what lies protected within. Who leads them? I asked. Do you know? A shadow crossed his face. I have suspicions. Nothing certain yet. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and snow. I shivered despite my warm clothing. You're cold, Reese observed. We should go in. But as I turned to leave, he caught my arm. Arya, he said, my name a question on his lips. I looked up at him, waiting. Thank you, he said finally, for accepting the bond, for understanding. The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes made my heart skip. You're welcome, I replied softly. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. His gaze dropped to my lips, and through the bond, I felt a flare of desire that matched my own. But then he stepped back, the moment passing like a cloud across the sun. We should join the council, he said, his voice once again formal and controlled. The council chamber was a circular room dominated by a massive round table carved from a single ancient tree. Around it sat 12 wolves, 6 men and 6 women, all with the hard, weather-beaten look of northern warriors. They rose as we entered, bowing deeply to Reese and, to my surprise, to me as well. My council, Reese said formally. I present Luna Arya, my mate and your Luna. I inclined my head, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. These were the most powerful wolves in the Northern Territory after Reese himself. Luna, they acknowledged in unison. We took our seats, Reese at what was clearly the head position, though at a round table that distinction was symbolic rather than physical. I sat to his right, aware of the evaluating gazes of the council members. Report, Reese commanded, and the meeting began. One by one, the council members provided updates on their areas of responsibility: border security, food stores, pack welfare, intelligence gathering. I listened carefully, building a mental map of the pack's structure and challenges. The situation was more precarious than I'd realized. Winter had come early and harsh, straining food reserves. The rogue attacks had intensified, requiring more warriors on constant patrol, which in turn left fewer to hunt and maintain the territory. And underlying it all was a current of tension, a sense that something worse was coming. "The Eastern Wolves report similar incursions along their borders," said a grizzled older wolf introduced as Commander Thorne. "They believe it's coordinated." "And the Western Territory?" Reese asked. "Silent," reported a sharp-featured female wolf named Lyra. "No responses to our messengers." Reese's expression darkened. "Continue attempts to contact them. We need to know if they're experiencing attacks as well, or if they're behind them," suggested Thorne grimly. The idea that another established pack might be orchestrating the rogue attacks sent a chill through me. Pack warfare hadn't occurred in generations. The consequences would be devastating. "We shouldn't jump to conclusions," I said, the words out of my mouth before I could consider the wisdom of speaking. All eyes turned to me, some surprised, others wary. "The Luna is right," Reese said to my relief. "We need evidence before making accusations. Lyra, double your intelligence efforts. I want to know what's happening in the Western Territory." Lyra nodded, shooting me a calculating look. The meeting continued, with discussion turning to the upcoming full moon ceremony, a northern tradition where pack bonds were renewed and strengthened. "The Luna will lead the ceremony, of course," said an older female wolf named Eris. I blinked in surprise. "I will. It is tradition," Eris explained. "The Luna leads the pack in the moon dance, then the Alpha joins to complete the bonding ritual." I glanced at Reese, who was watching me carefully. "I'm not familiar with northern moon ceremonies," I admitted. "Eris will instruct you," he said. "It's important that the pack see their Luna participating in our traditions." I nodded, understanding the political necessity. The northern wolves needed to accept me as their Luna, not just as their Alpha's southern mate. The meeting concluded with Reese assigning various tasks and responsibilities. As the council members filed out, several paused to welcome me formally to the pack. Their acceptance seemed cautious but genuine. When we were alone, Reese turned to me. "You did well," he said. "The council respects directness. Thank you for not undermining me when I spoke out of turn." "You didn't speak out of turn," he corrected. "You're Luna. Your voice carries weight equal to any council member's." He paused. "Including mine, in certain matters." I was still absorbing this when a knock came at the door. Callum entered, his expression grim. "Alpha, Luna," he acknowledged. "There's been another attack. The eastern outpost this time." Reese tensed. "Casualties?" 3 wounded, none fatal, but they left something behind." Callum held out a small cloth bundle. Reese took it, unwrapping the cloth carefully. Inside lay a small stone carving, a wolf with its throat torn out, its eyes rendered in what looked like tiny chips of Winterheart stone. "A message," Reese said, his voice dangerously soft. "For you," Callum confirmed. The patrol leader said it was placed deliberately where it would be found. I moved closer, drawn by the sinister energy of the small carving. "What does it mean?" Reese's eyes, when they met mine, were cold with fury. "It means someone wants me to know they're coming for me specifically, and they know about the caves." The pendant at my throat suddenly felt heavy, the mist inside swirling with agitation that matched my own rising anxiety. "What do we do?" I asked. "We prepare," Reese said grimly. "Callum, double the guards on the northern perimeter. I want the patrols reinforced immediately." Callum nodded and left to carry out his orders. "And us?" I asked, once we were alone. Reese looked at me, his expression softening slightly. "You should rest. The full moon ceremony is in 3 days, and you'll need to begin preparations with Eris tomorrow." "That's not what I meant," I said, moving closer to him. "What can I do to help? With this threat? With the pack?" Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. Most would be looking for a way back to the safety of the South by now. "I told you," I said softly. "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed, his voice equally soft. "You're not." For a moment we stood there, the bond between us pulsing with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Then Reese reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a touch so gentle it made my breath catch. "Be careful, Arya," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Whoever is behind these attacks, they will see you as a way to get to me. You are my mate now. That makes you both powerful and vulnerable." The concern in his voice, the warmth in his touch, they spoke of feelings beyond political alliance, beyond duty, or perhaps that was just what I wanted to believe. "I'll be careful," I promised. He nodded, then stepped back, his alpha mask sliding back into place. "I must go. There are preparations to be made, defenses to strengthen." As he turned to leave, I called after him, "Reese." He paused at the door, looking back. I meant what I said. Your pack is my pack now. Your fight is my fight. Something like gratitude flickered across his features. "Rest well, Luna," he said softly. "Tomorrow we prepare for war." As the door closed behind him, I touched the pendant at my throat, watching the mist inside swirl with uncertainty and determination in equal measure. I had come to the north as a political bride, a sacrifice for peace, but it seemed I had arrived on the brink of conflict instead. Whatever was coming for the northern pack, for my pack now, I would face it alongside my mate. The Ice King might be cold and controlled, but beneath that frozen exterior burned a fierce protectiveness for his people. And now, whether through bond or duty or something else entirely, I was one of them. I would not let him face this threat alone.